Let's start with the game that we're looking at here is our game previews with the Steelers at the Eagles. What we like to do is give you a little sample of a start-sit play, a DFS play, a prop to use, and we'll go through the injuries as well. Let's show you the fun graphic that we have here. No injuries. Hey, we like that.
Finally, one game.
None of note. Dave's start-sit suggestion is to sit Najee Harris. The DFS play is George Pickens, and the prop to play is Pat Freiermuth over 34.5 receiving yards. You're getting that at -117 at Caesars Sportsbook and Casino. So let's start with the big topic of this game, Dave, and that is, are you just starting all the Eagles? And we're just at that point where there's no hesitation. Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, just easy starts and hopefully big production.
Easy. And the matchup isn't exactly going to be that because the Steelers' defense is pretty good, but the way that the Eagles have been playing, the fact that they're coming off of a bye, maybe they try a couple new wrinkles in their passing game, but they've got the running game down pat. So I think when it comes to Miles Sanders, no question about him as a high-end #2 fantasy running back. The receivers should be awesome as well, Brown and Devontae Smith. Goddard, I mean, who else are you starting at tight end? If you've got Dallas Goedert, you don't even need a second tight end if you don't want to carry one. And Jalen Hurts is a top 4 fantasy quarterback.
All right, so that's the easy part is basically, like we say on our podcast, start all Eagles. Now, can you say sit all Steelers? Pat Freiermuth might be the one, Adam, that you'd push back on. And as I told you, Adam would join us here, our fantastic podcast host. So, Adam, is there any Steelers aside from Pat Freiermuth that you feel comfortable starting? Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. You know, how are we approaching the rest of those guys?
I would not feel comfortable starting any of them. My favorite wide receiver is George Pickens. I think I've had just about enough of Deontay Johnson. Pickens is more of a playmaker right now, even if he doesn't get as many targets as Deontay Johnson. So I think he's a low-end #3 wide receiver. Freiermuth is a guy you really can't get away from. I would start Dalton Schultz over him. I know you guys are a little hesitant on Dalton Schultz, but you know, Freiermuth had a good game last week, but about half his production came on the final drive of the game. So it's not exactly the most sustainable, predictable thing. He's the best option, I'd say, relative to his position. Pickens is a decent option at wide receiver, and that's about it. Najee's a flex. I mean, Najee probably gets you about 10 PPR fantasy points just based on total yards and a couple catches.
Blake Bortles would like a word with you about Pat Freiermuth's production. That doesn't matter when it happens, just as long as it happens throughout the course of the game. Next game we're looking at here is you see where we come out on Najee Harris. So Heath still likes him. Sportsline still likes him. We're a little bit concerned. Raiders at the Saints. This is an Adam Aizer game, so the injuries we're looking at here, Darren Waller trending in the right direction. However, the rest of the Saints pass catchers not named Chris Olave, a little bit of a concern. You got Michael Thomas with the foot injury, Landry with the ankle injury, Troutman with the ankle injury, and Juwan Johnson popped up on the injury report on Thursday with a hamstring problem. Keep an eye on him because if Troutman is out again, Johnson could be a fantastic start against the Raiders. They allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. The starter sit suggestions to start Derek Carr. The DFS play is Chris Olave, and the prop to play is Josh Jacobs over 85.5 rushing yards. It keeps going up, but he keeps following through, and you're getting that at Caesars at -117. So, Adam, when we're looking at the Raiders here, clearly it's an easy start with Josh Jacobs, easy start with Davante Adams as long as he's good to go despite the illness. But what about Carr? What about Waller? Renfro, any interest? Hollins, any interest? Where do you come out with the Raiders passing game not named Davante Adams?
Not really any interest on Renfro or Hollins. Carr's a solid option, right? He has a pretty high floor. He's got Davante Adams, and Davante Adams should go off in this game unless he's really sick. He's been dealing with the flu. But Carr, I think, is someone that if I could go back in time, I'd start him over Tom Brady. I agonized over that decision. I started Brady. I think you're going to get more than 19 fantasy points, but less than 25 fantasy points from Derek Carr. So he's fine. I'm a little worried about Waller if he plays. You know, he's been inconsistent this year. The Saints, the one thing they seem to be good at this year is stopping tight ends, second fewest fantasy points. But if I had Darren Waller on my team, I don't really know how I could justify sitting him, and I wouldn't be picking up another tight end. So you just start him, and you hope that he comes through with a big game. So basically, yeah, start Carr, start Waller, start Adams and Jacobs, avoid Renfro and Mac Hollins.
Yep, Renfro, somebody we said on Tuesday you could consider dropping even in PPR. Just has been a very disappointing season for him, understandably so, with Davante Adams joining the Raiders. Dave, on the other side, we know we're starting. We're starting Chris Olave, we're starting Alvin Kamara. There is some sleeper appeal, though, to Andy Dalton. There's sleeper appeal to Juwan Johnson. How much do you like those two guys?
I don't really love them, and I know last week they had good numbers. Well, because last week Andy Dalton had only 2 touchdowns until the 4th quarter. Then he started to connect with Juwan Johnson.
He actually had 4. He had 2 to the other team.
Okay, part of my point exactly. You look in his 3 previous games, he had 1 passing touchdown in each. I'm a little bit, the matchup doesn't scare me. It's the Raiders. It's more about Andy Dalton scaring me because we know what he's capable of not doing or hurting our fantasy team. Johnson had 1 target in the first 3 quarters last week against Arizona. Garbage time came. He had the 2 touchdowns. He hadn't scored in a game prior. He maxed out at 8 full PPR points in every game prior. I think you've got to use him at your own risk.
Yeah, I'm using him though. That's 11 targets in the last 2 weeks without Troutman on the field. Tom's not playing, Landry not playing. Matchup is fantastic. I'll take my chances with him. I think he has top 12 potential this week. I guess we should mention Taysom Hill as well. You're clearly going to use him more in non-PPR than PPR leagues. If he scores on the ground, you'll be happy about that. If he doesn't score, you'll be miserable. He is, as we like to say, a touchdown or bust tight end. Hopefully he did score against this Raiders defense. Next game that we're looking at here is the Dolphins at the Lions. I'm excited about this one. I think we're going to get a lot of points in this game because of how these two defenses have been playing more times than not. And certainly we've seen Jared Goff play a lot better at home than on the road. So Dave's got as the injuries you see here, Josh Reynolds, Jalen Waddle, we expect those guys to play. DeAndre Swift off the injury report. We'll talk about him in a second as well, which plays into the suggestion of sitting Jamal Williams. The DFS play is Raheem Mostert. And the prop to play is Tua over a half interception at -104 on Caesar. So Dave, DeAndre Swift coming back. Is it just all systems go? You're playing him, no hesitation.
You drafted him for this reason, Jamie, and the fact that he's back and healthy, full practices this week, and it's against a Dolphins defense that might struggle a little bit against him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I think you take your chances with him, call him a number 2 fantasy running back.
And so, and that plays into sitting Jamal Williams. No interest in him as a flex play, knowing that before Swift went down, he was still getting goal line opportunities and was still playing a lot in tandem with Swift.
He might still get those goal line opportunities, but if you remember last week, he got one of them and he fumbled it, and then Dan Campbell made a stink about it after the game. Of course he would, because you can't fumble at the goal line. So I wonder if he still has that role on lock. He is a flex at best and more of a bye week replacement running back than anything else.
Adam, this game is pretty easy from we know who to start, who to sit. You know, in terms of the Dolphins, you're starting both receivers. You can consider starting Raheem Mostert at this point. For the Lions, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're starting Swift. But the quarterbacks are interesting because we don't necessarily get consistent play from either of these two guys. So I'll ask you this question. Who's the best fantasy quarterback in this game going in and then coming out of it?
Oh, for me, it's Tua by a mile. I'm pretty sour on Jared Goff. It's been a little unfair to him because even when he's had Amon-Ra St. Brown in recent weeks, Amon-Ra St. Brown has left early or been limited. And he's been okay when he's had St. Brown. Actually, his best game came without Amon-Ra St. Brown, the 41-point game against the Seahawks. But, you know, you're not really getting anything from Josh Reynolds. You're not getting anything from TJ Hawkinson most weeks. So I just don't love Jared Goff. I just don't want to gamble on a quarterback that throws as many interceptions and makes as many mistakes as he does. But Tua, I really like in this game. My only concern is a lack of pass attempts. You know, if they run up the score or something like that, or they just run all over the Lions, because you can do that. I love Mostert in this game. But I think Hill and Waddle, one of the two at least, should have a huge game. If we can get 2 touchdowns from Tua Tagovailoa, we're definitely going to get more than 20 fantasy points. The yards will be there. So I like Tua a lot more.
I can see where you're coming from. I have Tua ranked ahead of Jared Goff, but Jared Goff in 3 home games so far this season, he's averaging 31 fantasy points per game. This Dolphins defense in the secondary is absolutely abysmal. They're so beat up. I would not be surprised if Goff is the better quarterback. I like him as a sleeper this week. I think he's going to deliver quality production in what should be one of the more high-scoring games of the week. Let's look now at the last game that we're talking about for the 1 o'clock slate on CBS games, and that's the Patriots at the Jets. This one probably not going to be a lot of high scoring when it comes to how these offenses look right now, and there are a lot of injury concerns when it comes to the guy who's missing. We know Breece Hall not going to be there for the Jets. Nelson Aguilar, that doesn't really matter. Corey Davis already has been ruled out, but Elijah Moore is going to play for the Jets. The starter sit play is going to be sit James Robinson, so even though he's now a member of the Jets, stay away from him. You might want to stay away from Michael Carter as well. The DFS play is the Patriots DST, still relatively cheap on both sites, and the prop to play is Jakobi Meyers over 50.5 receiving yards. That's at -135. So Mac Jones is going to start. Dave, I'll ask you this question. Is Mac Jones good or bad for Jakobi Meyers?
I think he's good for Jakobi Meyers because I think he won't challenge downfield as much. I think he's going to look for those short throws and try and just get into a good rhythm. I think that's a smart thing to try and do against the Jets, try and negate that pass rush a little bit, and to stay away from Ahmad Gardner. He's been playing really, really well, but he's an outside corner. Myers lines up all across the field. Maybe this week they use him a little bit more in the slot, and certainly even when he lines up wide, he crosses the field. He's a middle-of-the-field type of target. I expect him to have a pretty good game.
Adam, what was that stat you had on our podcast yesterday about Myers and the games with Mac Jones?
Right, if you take away that Buffalo game last year where Mac Jones threw 3 times, Jakobi Meyers has scored double-digit PPR fantasy points in 7 of his last 8 games with Mac Jones. And I also don't count last week when Mac Jones barely played. So is 10 PPR fantasy points a great game? No, but it's a really good floor. You can pretty much put that in the bank. If Mac Jones is playing and Jakobi Meyers is playing, you're going to get at least 10 PPR fantasy points, at worst, a number 3 receiver.
Yep, and there you go. And that's, by the way, what we like to call an Azer stat, taking out a game, a half of this. You like our podcast, you get a lot of Azer stats. All right, speaking of Azer stats, Adam, I don't know what the backfield split is without Breece Hall comparatively to what Michael Carter and James Robinson can do, but let's just forget about that. What do we expect from Michael Carter and James Robinson in this game against the Patriots? The run defense prior to last week had been fantastic, and as we've heard from Robert Saleh, the head coach there, that we're going to probably get a hot hand approach from this backfield.
All right, yeah, so I'm looking down at my notes to give you another Azer stat. We got 6 games over the last 2 seasons where Michael Carter's had 14 or more touches, and he has scored 14.4 or more PPR fantasy points in 4 of those 6 games. I say the number 4 enough there. Anyway, he's been pretty good when he's gotten the work. I don't expect a lot from James Robinson this week. I don't expect Ty Johnson to take him off the field on running down. So I think you've got a good flex option here. Maybe a number 2 running back in Michael Carter. You know, I think he'll come through with double-digit PPR fantasy points. Will it be more like 10? Will it be more like 16 or so? Probably closer to 10, but I think he's going to come through. I'd start him over Najee Harris, for example. All
right, so we'll see what happens there. He's going to be the first one to get the chance to have the hot hand, so at least you know about that. We'll see what Robinson does in his first game with the Jets, how cautious they are with him playing, but he is expected to suit up.